At Truth Lookout, we investigate and verify compelling information that is not often publicly shared. We share this information without any biased media interference, political pandering, or censorship. We will share our findings on Tuesdays. Not Tuesdays, but Tuesdays. Our topics will cover important social issues which are often overlooked or ignored due to their complexity. Our panel of experts will continually vary as the investigations evolve or change. Last week's brief overview of human trafficking in Columbus, Ohio, leads us to a deeper dive that our team has spent months investigating. As if the plight of human trafficking victims isn't devastating enough, we have uncovered the fact that certain organizations and civic leaders who claim to assist victims are merely acting as poverty pimps. Poverty pimps are individuals or agencies that make money off the plight of those whose they claim to serve: the poor, the underserved, the marginalized, and unseen. Their claims of serving victims is what we have investigated and why we can verify a significant difference in standards of care and service from one agency to the next. Our hope by sharing our findings is that improvements can be established and that some legislated overarching standard of care and harm reduction might occur before poverty pimps gobble up the limited charitable contributions while merely perpetuating the suffering of our most vulnerable populations. It's no revelation that the relationship of the drug trade and human trafficking is one of enormous complexity. Focusing only on the overlap of drug and human trafficking routes is not sufficient to examine the many facets of the human trafficking illicit drug trade relationship. Moreover, the diverse forms of drugs intersect in different ways with the many forms of human trafficking. Diverse drugs have an important role in the recruitment, retention, and exploitation of human trafficking victims for all forms of sexual exploitation. They are used to compel individuals to perform sexual acts. Drug trafficking is not related just to the business of sex trafficking. Drug trafficking is linked to many forms of trafficking, including diverse forms of labor trafficking, begging, and diverse forms of hard physical labor. Smuggled individuals often pay for their movement to their destination by being drug couriers. Drugs are used to recruit new victims, to retain them in an exploited state, and to maximize their exploitation. These different results are achieved by means of different drugs, both naturally grown commodities such as poppy-based drugs and by using synthetic drugs. Addictive drugs, such as heroin or fentanyl, are often used to compel individuals into sex exploitation and to keep them indebted to their traffickers. The diverse relationships between human trafficking and drugs have rarely been discussed in literature. There is a tendency to examine these forms of illicit trade separately or to group them together with other forms of crime. Thereby, the analysis loses the distinct linkages of these two phenomena. Yet examination of many prosecuted criminal cases and other analyses provide insights into the complex relationship of the two phenomena in different regions of the world. There are a couple of criminal cases here in Columbus, Ohio that have uncovered that complex relationship. A leader in a case with 23 defendants involved in narcotics and human trafficking conspiracies pleaded guilty in federal court in April to drug, gun, human trafficking, and money laundering crimes. From 2008 until June 2022, Cordell Washington, 37, of Pickerington, ran a large-scale drug trafficking organization in Columbus with co-defendant Patrick Saltz. Their operations also included sex trafficking, labor trafficking, fraud, and money laundering. A multi-agency law enforcement task force initially announced the case in July 2022 after a federal grand jury indicted 11 defendants for distributing bulk amounts of fentanyl, cocaine, and crack cocaine within 1,000 feet of a Columbus elementary school. In October 2022, the government added 12 defendants and 28 new charges. Court documents detail that the drug trafficking organization brought large quantities of fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, crack cocaine, methamphetamine, oxycodone, alprazolam, and marijuana into Columbus. These drugs were sold or used to coerce individuals into sexual activity for some members of the drug ring and their profit. The drug trafficking organization sold drugs out of more than 20 Columbus residences to customers and distributed larger amounts to regional drug traffickers who then trafficked those narcotics to places such as West Virginia in the Northern District of Ohio. Most of the alleged drug dealing took place within 1,000 feet of Burroughs Elementary School in Columbus at a residence on South Burgess. For example, one of Washington and Salt's numerous subordinates sold approximately $18,000 worth of narcotics per day from the location on South Burgess. In addition to the organization's connections to sex trafficking, as part of his plea, Washington admitted to labor trafficking male drug addicts. The defendant provided the men with their drug of choice after the men completed construction or cleaning projects at residences owned by the drug trafficking organization. The men were recruited by Washington, and some completed the work for him under serious threat of harm. Washington would provide the addicts with advances on small amounts of drugs, so they were well enough to perform physical labor. If Washington was not pleased with their work product, he would not complete the final drug payment and would threaten violence against them. Washington used numerous methods to launder the group's drug trafficking proceeds, including establishing front businesses that purported to be rental, repair, and construction companies. Washington and Salt's 20 drug houses were located all over the west side of Columbus on the hilltop. The two were so revered by addicts and trafficking victims, along with law enforcement throughout central Ohio, that Salt's became known by a few nicknames: West Side Pat and White Boy Pat. The areas they operated in were continually plagued by addicts and traffic victims continually committing crimes such as theft, prostitution or solicitation, burglary, armed robbery, and so on to fund their addiction. Committing these crimes nearby allowed them to make money and then a quick visit to one of the 20 nearby drug houses afterwards. As the stranglehold that these and other traffickers had on the area continued, many nonprofit organizations became increasingly burdened by the near-constant flux of addicts and crime, while still working to maintain and serve the overall needs of the community. New nonprofits focused on harm reduction started entering the area to serve the growing community needs with even more focused missions. New addiction treatment facilities opened, new recovery and addiction support organizations, new drop-in centers and outreach organizations focused on trafficked women, new rehabilitation programs, and more. Community centers, nonprofit organizations, and faith-based groups offered more and more essential assistance such as access to educational programs, employment resources, housing support, and vocational training. The community was working to create a stable and supportive backdrop for individuals seeking recovery from substance abuse. Among this growing flux of service organizations working to address and improve the needs of the community, some organizations weren't able to fully comprehend the complexity of the intertwined issues. The community continually worked together to voice their concerns to underdeveloped programs, mismanaged programs, and unnecessary programs. The community challenged these organizations to pay closer attention to their needs and standards as good neighbors, particularly when the programs created new challenges for the community to deal with. While we understand that many new nonprofit organizations may not always have their finger on the pulse of a community's needs at a new location, it's imperative that they are open to critical feedback and support from the community. This is especially true when unforeseen or critical issues arise related to the location, clients, or services being provided. Collaboration between neighbors and the organization are critical to building a safer and more effective partnership as good neighbors. When these organizations ignore or dismiss these opportunities for collaboration from the community, trust begins to erode. This erosion of trust is intensified over time, particularly if the safety of the community or crime issues are involved. It begs the question, are you here to help the community? And if not, why are you here? When community crime and safety concerns are ignored, shrugged off, or even combated by any organization, it becomes necessary to involve local government, law enforcement, and various oversight and governing agencies. Even then, elected officials often interject their political opinions into the discussion and may choose to also ignore the concerns from the community, offering no solutions or governance. Next Tuesday, we will dig much deeper into this issue as we focus on one particular location in Franklinton. This location has been the center of significant issues in the community, and we're going to shed a lot of light on the truth of what is occurring.